send out polls to my Patreon community, and they are the ones who choose the painting that I'm going to be creating, or the line and wash piece that I'm going to be teaching. And for this first one, they chose the mistletoe idea. All right. So let's draw and paint some mistletoe. All right. Let me just briefly explain what I have on hand today so that you can prepare yourself before we jump in, because if not, I'm going to get started with explaining everything. And then in the middle of my explanation, I don't want you to have to get up and look for something and then you kind of lost the two steps that I was explaining. So let me just explain what I have in front of me in terms of my supplies and the specific colors that I'm going to be using when we get to the watercolor washes, so that you can prepare those things or something similar. Okay. So first and foremost, I'm going to be working in a sheet of cold pressed watercolor paper that has been cut down to 5x7 inches. Why 5x7? Because this is one of the common greeting card sizes that you can find. And what I'm going to be doing is trying to leave a little bit of space down here for happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever it is that you want to write down here. If you want to add handwritten lettering, of course, because if you don't want to, that's fine as well. But if you are going to be adding it, it's important that you kind of plan for a little bit of negative space down here if you want to fit that in later. Okay. Anyway, cold pressed, 140 pound or 300 GSM watercolor paper, and this is 100% cotton. This is paper from a brand called Baohong. I kind of like it. It's a little bit, at least where I live, I can get this paper. It's less expensive than Arches, and it's still great quality for the techniques that I usually like bringing in when painting with watercolor. All right. So that's it for my paper. Now, in terms of my watercolor paint, I'm going to be using this palette. And this palette has a combination of paint from Daniel Smith and Winsor & Newton's professional line. So yes, I sometimes mix brands. I just make sure that the quality of the watercolor paint that I am kind of bringing into the same piece is the same. I wouldn't combine lower grade watercolor paint with higher grade watercolor paint. I make sure I have a separate student grade palette that I have, which has paint from Van Gogh, which is one of my favorite, more accessibly priced watercolor paint brands. Right? But this is what I would refer to as my professional grade watercolor palette that I'm currently using. And it does have a few colors from Daniel Smith. Most of these colors are from Winsor & Newton's professional line. Okay. So I'm really just going to be using one single color from Daniel Smith for this little illustration that I'm going to be doing. And that color is Undersea green, which is this one right here. Now, if you've ever used Undersea green from Daniel Smith, then you probably already know that it is a beautiful, deep, rich, warm green that is made from kind of gold colors and green colors, and it kind of separates when it's drying, creating a beautiful kind of visual texture and effect. And so that is why I oftentimes just buy myself a tube of Undersea green, because I've never really found another green quite like it. However, if you don't have Undersea green, just any warm green will do just fine. Why warm green? I personally like warmer greens, but you could bring in a kind of mid-tone, not a mid-tone, but like not too warm, not too cool green as well. So, for example, olive green or sap green or even hooker's green or Windsor green, even all of those are fine. Just got Yay, Shelly! I am excited for you as well. Let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on like what you think of the green, because honestly, I haven't found anything like it. And for me, where I currently live, it's easier for me to get Winsor & Newton's paint than Daniel Smith paint. So for me, most of these are Winsor & Newton, but I do my best to buy my undersea green because I like it so much. Anyway, so undersea green is the color that I'm going to be using to paint my little leaves and stems. Not really the stems because that's going to be line work. So the leaves mostly. And then to create lighter green, because as I said, undersea green is very deep and dark. And so I want to create a couple of different values in my leaves so that they look a little bit more, I guess, realistic, though we're not going for super high levels of realism with this line and wash piece. But I do try to make sure to create a nice variety of values in my piece because it leads to more dimension and depth and makes things more glowy and vibrant. So to create my lighter version of undersea green, I'm going to be adding in this lemon yellow from Winsor & Newton, mixing a little bit of this lemon yellow into the undersea green to get a lighter green. Whenever I want a lighter green, I'm just going to be mixing a little bit of this lemon yellow, which is a cool yellow, into this green, right? And that is how I'm going to get a nice variety of green values in my leaves. Okay, and now for the red bow, I'm going to be using this red, which is cadmium red from Winsor & Newton. This, sorry, it's cadmium red light, which is the warmer one, because if you use cadmium red deep, that is going to be cooler than the cadmium red light. So whenever I am going to be using or choosing reds for a Christmas themed piece, I usually like going for a warmer red or at least a middle of the range red, which is not too cool and not too warm. All right. And I do have a video where I explain how to tell between warm and cool colors. I can't really get into that right now, but I would highly recommend checking that out if you want to. It's a little class that will clear everything up for you. And I even provide color wheel exercises. So cadmium red light for me is going to be the red that I use in the bow. And if I want to create a little bit of a darker red, if I want to add a little bit more dimension in the bow, I'm just going to be adding a little bit of Payne's gray into my cadmium red light to create a slightly darker version of that red for certain little sections in the bow, just so that I don't use a flat single red, right? Payne's gray is a cool biased gray, which has a little bit of blue in it. Now, you don't have to use Payne's gray if you don't have it. You can use neutral tints, neutral black if you want to. You can even bring in ultramarine blue and darken the red with blue instead of gray. Honestly, that also leads to great results. And I would prefer bringing in ultramarine instead of bringing in a flat ready-made black, because sometimes things like ivory black or Mars black or lamp black tend to be a little bit too flat and dull and too stark looking. So whatever it is that you choose to darken the red with, just try to think of what you would be mixing into your red to create those darker versions of your red. All right, whether it's a gray like Payne's gray or even Jane's gray from Daniel Smith, or a neutral tint, anything like that, or go with a darker blue, indigo, even ultramarine blue, anything that can make the red look a little bit darker. Okay, and then just, if you want to write it down or whatever, I really like writing down the colors that I'm going to be using before actually using them so that I know I have a strategy, right? Okay, so yeah, and the only other color that I'm going to be bringing in is yellow ochre. This is yellow ochre. It's a very light neutral. It's essentially a neutralized yellow, kind of beigey golden looking color, and that is going to be used to paint the little berries. Now, the berries are like an off-white in mistletoe, or at least the mistletoe that I see more often. I know that a lot of people paint the berries red in mistletoe. Maybe they turn red. I'm not quite sure. I don't see a lot of mistletoe where I live, but when it comes to the reference photos that I've seen, those berries are like an off-white, kind of like a golden looking color, a little bit of a warmer tone to them, a warmer color. So I'm going to be creating a little sense of tones within the berries using this raw sienna or yellow ochre, or whatever it is that you have. Raw sienna and yellow ochre are very similar. They're both a very light, neutral, beigey golden color. So whatever you have, whether it's yellow ochre or raw sienna, this is yellow ochre, I think. Um, I kind of use them interchangeably, so I think it was yellow ochre that I filled this in with the last time. But whatever it is that you have, that is going to be fine. Okay. All right. So, and aside from my paint colors, let me know if you have any questions at all. Oh, I think I have some comments. Let me read them. Most of my painting is schminke, but for the same reason you stated regarding Winsor and Newton paints, I decided to start switching out Daniel Smith because it's made in the US. Switching out, yes. Yeah, Shelly, I think we have to many times make the practical choices when we want to stay consistent with any painting medium. We have to really, because paint is going to be running out and we are going to have to replace those paint colors, and we have to stay mindful of what is easier for us to actually get on a consistent or semi-consistent basis, depending on how frequently you paint, right? It's not very practical to buy paint that you're not going to be able to replace soonish, at least if you're planning on making your art practice a consistent thing. I'm also glad you're using Bauhan paper. Yeah, it's pretty good paper. Cannot complain about Bauhan paper. It's pretty good. All right, cool. So this is the pen that I'm going to be using. A bit ago, I explained how it's very important that for line and wash, when you're going to be bringing in watercolor, you need to use a pen that has ink that is permanent and smudge proof, right? Now, there are artists out there who do the pen work before the watercolor, and there are artists who do it the other way around, the watercolor and then the pen work. It leads to different results. Usually, if you do the watercolor first and then the pen work, that creates more of a looser, more expressive style. The way that I do it is I do the pen work first and then I do the watercolor. It neither is right or wrong or better or worse. It's more so what you like doing and the type of outcome that you like to create, the style you're after, right? This is a micron pen. It's a 0.5 tip size. Anything like this or around this size will do just fine. And then when it comes to the drawing pencil that I'm going to be using to create my preliminary pencil sketch, because yes, I do go in with pencil first, then I do the pen work, then I do the watercolor. All right. And as you can see, I'm going to be using a B pencil, but I would highly recommend using an HB pencil or even an H if you like harder pencil grades than a B or a softer pencil grade. I do have a video in my channel where I explain all about basic drawing supplies and different drawing pencil grades. If that is something that you're interested in learning about, I would recommend checking that out. But the reason why I'm going to be using a B pencil today is so that you can see what I am doing a little bit more clearly, especially because the camera sometimes has issues focusing on very light things. And when it has white paper, this is why I'm using a B pencil, which is slightly softer than what I would usually be using for my preliminary sketch. So use an HB or an H is what I would recommend. And then finally, I have these two erasers on hand, a soft graphite eraser. This is my favorite type of eraser, and a kneadable eraser, which you can use to lighten your graphite before doing the pen and ink. And that is it. Okay, so let's get started with our mistletoe sketch. Does everything make sense? Does the process that we're going to be following make sense to you? All right, so I seem to have no questions. Let's do this. Okay, so with my pencil, B pencil, hold on, let me make sure that everything is working okay. Yes, okay. Let's start with the first stem or first section of mistletoe. So I'm going to be taking you through the process of drawing three mistletoe sections kind of tied together with a bow. All right. So the first one, let's start with the top of the stem, right? And I would recommend all of the lines that you create, try to incorporate a little bit of a curve, a little bit of an imperfection to it, because ultimately you're drawing and painting an organic object. Okay, leaves, trees, rocks, water, all of these things that are organic are imperfect, are asymmetrical. And we need to remember these things when we're both drawing and painting them if we want the results to be more realistic. Okay, so you can see a little bit of a curve here. And then what we're going to be doing is creating a little bit of a kind of a wishbone. So that's the thing with mistletoe, is that it kind of separates out into two little legs, if you will. And then the leaves are also almost always in pairs. So think of mistletoe as like a wishbone, okay? But don't make your wishbones too symmetrical either, because again, this is an organic object, okay? We're trying to incorporate some asymmetry, some imperfection. So you can see how I made this one a little bit longer than this one over here, all right? And that's where I'm starting. Let me see if I have any questions. Can you repeat the size of your paper? Yes, Camilla, welcome. The size of my paper is 5 by 7 inches. And Cher, welcome, Cher. My micron pens keep drying up even when not used. I tried put in alcohol, no luck. I tried warm water, but nah. Do you ever have this problem? Yes, Cher. Sometimes when I don't use them for a while, I notice that I come back and they're a little bit dry. Sorry. Um, Definitely from out of my three favorite drawing pens, the Micron pens are my least favorite. My most favorite drawing pens that I usually notice don't dry out as much are my pigment liners from Staedtler and my Unipen fine liners from Mitsubishi Pencil Co. Those are my top two drawing pens, at least from the ones that I have experienced at this point in my journey, and micron pens would be the third. For that exact same reason that you mentioned, I noticed that the ink dries out a lot faster, leading to like line work breaking and stuff like that, which is fine, but it can be a little bit annoying, right? If you don't have that flow of ink. So yes, I have definitely experienced that, Share. If it is becoming frustrating, I would recommend trying other types of pens, because yes, micron pens, even though they are quite popular, I wouldn't say they are the best. This is actually my first time, not my first, I think my second time using micron pens in a while, because I bought them just because they were super cheap. I bought them with a on sale. But for the last few years, I've been using my pigment liners from Staedtler and my Unipen fine liners a lot more. Thanks for explaining the pencils to use. I have trouble erasing enough of the lines before I paint. Yeah, Shelly, it's so important to choose a good pencil that is going to help you draw lightly. And also, as you're drawing, don't press down hard, because once you scratch or create like little indentations on your watercolor paper, there is no way to take that back, you know? So draw lightly. You can see how I'm holding my pencil from a little bit higher up, right? I'm not doing this and trying to press down. I'm holding it from higher up and I'm drawing lightly, exactly because I want to be able to make any refinements, any corrections. And before starting with my watercolor washes, I am going to be erasing my graphite. All right, cool. So from here, what I want you to do is start drawing the bottom two leaves of the mistletoe, of both mistletoe sections. I'm terrible with names of plant parts. I'm terrible. So if anyone knows what different plant part names are, let me know. But yeah, so mistletoe leaves are a little bit longer. Um, and even as I am drawing the leaves, I'm trying to incorporate a little bit of variety in shape and even size, right? I don't want my leaves to be all the same. And in fact, I want some of these leaves to look like they are overlapping in different ways, like they are twisting in different ways. You know, sometimes you're seeing the bottom plane of the leaf, sometimes you're seeing the upper plane of the leaf. That is going to lead to more realistic results as opposed to making everything super symmetrical and organized and perfect and making all of your leaves exactly the same size, exactly the same shape. Okay, so you can see how I'm varying my shapes a little bit, and I'll make sure to incorporate even more variety as I continue drawing more leaves. Okay, so once you have these, you're going to add a little bit more fullness to these sections over here. So let's just say that I have a couple of leaves here. So I have maybe 1 and 2. And if they're too perfect looking and you want to change them, change the shape a little bit, just keep it light. Keep your drawing light until you like it. Okay, if you don't like your drawing, which is the foundation for everything that is coming up next, you're not going to like the results because this is the foundation for everything. So if at any point you want to erase something and change the shape of a leaf or work on your overlapping or whatever it is that you want to do it. Do it at this point instead of waiting and just keeping it as is, because no amount of color or pen and ink or whatever, nothing is going to fix your your drawing, you know, your foundation. So as you can see, I changed the shape and the location of one of these leaves, but I made sure to keep it at 2, right? Because I'm trying to add them in pairs. At least most of these leaves are going to be in pairs. Sometimes they're not. Because honestly, if as you are drawing this, you want to add a little bit more fullness, or you think that your drawing would look a little bit better with a single extra leaf somewhere, do it. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. So let's just say that from here, I want to add another 2 leaves. I want to make them longish, overlap them in different ways. Okay. And then from here, maybe I do 1, maybe 2. And that's going to be the first stem or the first set, if you will, that is going to be tied by this ribbon over here. All right. And if I want to add an extra little leaf later or whatever, I can come back and do it. But for now, I want you guys to focus on this single part of the mistletoe. So as I said before, we're going to be doing 3, okay? 3 mistletoe sections are going to be tied together by a bow. This is just 1, okay? And we want to add a little bit more fullness and interest to the piece, okay? So let's get started with the next section of mistletoe, right? I'm going to come back to the beginning over here at the top, add my second section. The bow, visualize the bow, it's going to be somewhere around here, all right? But I have to overlap these sections a little bit. And then for this one, part of the wishbone is going to be coming out to this side because it just makes sense with how everything is looking here. It makes sense that I add in some fullness in that area. And the other part of the what's it called? The wishbone is going to be coming down like this. Think of it as a Y. Okay, we're starting with a Y, and your drawing does not have to be exactly the same as mine. What is important here is that you see what is happening in your drawing and then simply add in that wishbone in whatever direction or angle it makes sense for you, so that you can create a little bit more fullness in that area that you need to add more fullness into. Does that make sense? That for me, it's very important that I make you think about your own process, because learning to draw is not about following a step by step super strict process, like draw a straight line here, and then 2 millimeters to the right of that you're going to add an angle that is at a 45-degree angle, and then you add a little circle there. Like, for me, those kinds of drawing tutorials are worthless, because they're not actually teaching you how to think and how to draw. The way that I teach people to draw is actually making you think, making you observe references of things when you need references, giving you a process that you can use to pretty much draw anything that you would like to draw. Okay? Because that is what I want to help people with. I want to help people be able to draw and paint anything. And you're only going to be able to get to that point if you are able to use your critical thinking skills, the essentials for drawing, which I have another video on, simplifying everything into basic shapes, and working general towards specific, and working lightly in the beginning. These are all things that you're going to be able to use to draw anything. Okay. But then it's a case by case scenario where you pull these tools as needed. Okay. So hopefully you can see how this is my second Y that I'm starting with. And hopefully it makes sense why I created this Y in that location, to fill in, to add a little bit more fullness here, and to maybe add a little bit more fullness over here. Okay, and don't try not to get confused by the shapes that you already have there. Okay, if you need to make this a little bit longer or whatever, that's fine. Okay, so from here, I want you to do the same thing that we did when we drew the first one, which is you're going to be creating the leaves. This is a weird shape for a leaf. Let me fix it. Creating the leaves that are at the bottom, okay? At the bottom of each leg of the wishbone, you're going to have 2 pairs of leaves. So start with those. And I'm going to do this one over here. Maybe I add the leaves over here for this one. Okay. So I have the 2 leaves at the bottom of each little stem section. And then from here, let me erase this little line here and maybe fix this leaf shape. It's a little bit weird. Okay, great. I have my 2 sections here. This one is one, and this one is the other one. Now from here, you can add a couple of more leaves wherever you feel you need them. So for me, I feel like I need some leaves here in this area. I need a little bit more fullness here. So I'm just gonna do a leaf coming in this direction. And for you, it might be a little bit different. Maybe you have another empty section on the right over here or on the left. Wherever you feel you need a little bit more fullness, add leaves there, right? Both of these leaves are coming toward this direction, toward the left. And then here, I don't think I need any more over here. Maybe I just add in one longer leaf like that. Okay. So you can see how all of a sudden this looks a little bit more full, right? Let me do a little bit of fixing of some leaves here. All right, cool. Things are looking nice and full now, nice and asymmetrical. And as I said, I want to add one last little section over here at the top. Okay. Do you ever draw, then transfer your drawing onto your paper? Yes, Shelly, I'm glad that you asked that. So many times, especially when I am drawing something that I feel is a little bit more complex or requires very specific proportions or perspective work, what I do, Shelly, is create my drawing freehand on my sketchbook, which I usually use a 9 by 12-inch sketchbook, which is perfect because I usually paint in smaller scale 9 by 12-inch watercolor paper. So I create my pencil sketch on my sketchbook in the size that I want my final piece to be. And then I trace over my sketch with tracing paper and I do my transferring onto my watercolor sheet. When it is something that is relatively simple, at least for me with my current skill level, or something that I have drawn many times before that I feel I'm confident in drawing, then I go ahead and draw it right on the watercolor sheet. Hope that that makes sense. Okay, so I'm gonna give you an extra minute. Let me bring my camera down. I'm gonna give you an extra minute so that you can, there you go. So that you can just make sure that your two mistletoe sections look okay, that you like them, your leaf shapes are okay, and that you have a nice sense of asymmetry throughout, right? It reminds me of when I was getting started with drawing trees or dry trees, especially. When I started drawing dry trees in the beginning, it was so hard for me because I what you need to understand is that your brain is always going to go with the simplest way to do things. And symmetry and geometric shapes and straight vertical and horizontal lines are going to be easier for your brain to create and understand than something that is irregular, organically shaped, has asymmetry to it. And so many times, if you allow your brain to just go on, if you start doing things on autopilot and you don't self correct and you don't remember, oh, this is actually asymmetrical, right? And all these kinds of things, then you're going to finish your drawing or painting and you're going to notice that things look very unnatural, very stiff. And so what happened to me when I was first getting started with drawing dry trees is that I ended up with with a shape that looked like a broomstick or like what's like a rake, I think is the proper term for it, where you have very stiff kind of sections coming out of a very straight line. Like there's a very symmetrical shape that did not look in any means like a tree. And so, what did it take for me to break away from that and start improving my tree shapes? I needed to start observing what trees actually look like in real life. Trees around you, trees in reference photos, and really observe all of that irregularity, imperfection, and what is actually going on with tree branches and all that kind of stuff. And then as you're moving forward with your drawing, continue reminding yourself of those things, continue observing reference photos, right? And override what your brain is telling you to do because it's going to continue coming back to doing things as easily as possible. Okay. So far so good. Are you guys okay? Okay, so I seem to have no more questions. I'm going to do the very last stem section that is going to be tied by the ribbon. And I already started drawing the top section here. You can see the 3 lines, right? Visualize the bow, which is going to be here. I'll do that in just a bit. But first, let's do the most important and more difficult part of this drawing, which is the leaves. So I already have quite a bit of fullness over here. So maybe analyze your drawing, see how it's going. Maybe you don't need very many leaves at all, but I do want at least another section over here above the bow. But observe your drawing and notice where you have empty spaces where maybe you would benefit from adding a bit of an extra stem with leaves there. And wherever you do need that, maybe you're going to add in your line on this section here instead of on the other one, right? And add in a bit of a leaf over here. I think that's going to look better. So I'm just going to correct that, add my other little section stem over here, bring it down. This is my last one. And then the wishbone is going to start here. And this is where the wishbone or the Y separates. Okay, so here it is. One section is coming down like this, or maybe it's coming down here. And the other one is going off to the opposite direction here where I want a little bit more fullness. Okay, so it's coming down like this, and then it spreads to the left and to the right, okay, in a slight curve. And then from here, all I'm gonna do is the two leaves at the bottom. Keep the leaves longish, have a long smushed oval. And then I'm gonna do a couple of leaves over here. One, maybe this one goes behind this one. And that one goes behind that one. With this process, you're going to be able to draw mistletoe for whatever size you need. Instead of trying to just copy what I'm doing, I'm giving you the tools that you need to actually think of this process on your own, right? Okay, great. So I'm done. Really, I don't think I need any more leaves. If I add any more leaves, I can make this drawing process more complicated for me, especially because I'm still going to be adding some berries and I'm going to be adding the bow. So there are still going to be certain elements that are going to make the composition even more interesting. I think I'm going to change this leaf here a little bit. I think it's going to look better if it comes out to the side. Kind of like that. There it is. If you need to change any leaf shapes, go ahead. You can make a certain leaf shape a little bit smaller or larger. Right? But I think that's a good size. I think it looks full enough. And yeah, I think I'm good to go. So from here, I'm going to add the bow and then I'm going to add the berries. So let's start with the bow. I'm going to start with the little tie section in the middle, right here. And then I'm going to do the ribbon on either side, and even the bow I want to make slightly asymmetrical. Maybe this one is a little bit smaller or a little bit lower or slightly different in shape than the ribbon on the right. Okay. And then these sections of the bow here, I'm just going to make relatively short. There it is. And this one is going to come down behind the mistletoe. So this ribbon section comes in front and this ribbon section goes behind. And finally, all we're missing are the little berries. Okay, So the little berries can be added really wherever you want. They do have to be somewhat connected to one of the stems that you already have, right? But what I would recommend is observing your drawing, and wherever it is that you feel you could add a little bit more fullness or points of interest, go ahead and place berries there. Okay? Because for me, for example, I think I could place some berries here. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, and 3. A little cluster of berries there because I had a little empty section. And then another cluster of berries over here. 1, 2. Maybe I just do 2 there. Or maybe a third one could be peeping out from behind that leaf. Okay. And if you want to add a single berry, that is fine too. Just notice where you have some empty spaces and where you could benefit from adding a little bit of a point of interest. I think that's enough. Yeah, I think that's enough. I think if I keep adding berries, I'm just going to make my drawing way too complicated. How are you guys doing? I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm going to make certain sections a little bit more light. Wherever you feel you went too dark or you have too much graphite, just go in with your kneaded eraser or your regular soft graphite eraser and tap over that section. Some people even like making a little burrito or cylindrical form with their kneaded eraser. And they go over their drawing like this. That's also something you could do. But don't erase things so much that you won't be able to see your pencil work as you're drawing. Okay, so it is now time to move on to the pen and ink process. So going in with my Micron pen. And what's important when you're doing your pen and ink work is that you account for sections that are overlapping or things that are overlapping. Because when something is in front of something else, you shouldn't be, one of the edges is going to be covered, right, by the thing that is on top. And so you shouldn't go in with your pen and draw that edge that actually wouldn't be visible. So be very careful with that. What I like doing is doing my shapes first and then doing my lines. So for me, for example, I know that these parts of the bow are visible. So I'm going to go ahead and draw those or go over them with my pen. And what is important as well when you're drawing with pen is to keep it moving, keep it flowing. You don't want to stop because if you stop, if you hesitate, that is going to lead to stop and start marks. Okay? And you're not going to be able to erase them. This part of the bow, I decided is going to be coming in front. And the other part of the bow is going to be going back behind the leaves. So I might leave that until later. Right now, I want to start with the shapes that are actually in front or that I can complete the line around the edges of the shape. Okay? So all of the leaves, for example, this one here is in front, right? The berries, wherever the berries are, if you have any berries that are actually in front of stems or leaves, draw them first. Here is another berry, right? This leaf I can see completely. This leaf as well. I'm going to trace that first. So you kind of have to think before you go in and do your lines, because otherwise you can end up tracing over a line that wouldn't be visible, and you're not going to be able to erase that, right? So be careful. Once you start with your lines and your shapes, keep it flowing, keep it moving. But what I like doing is pausing every couple of minutes, right? And asking myself, can I actually see this shape fully? And then if so, if once I understand what I'm looking at and the overlapping taking place in that section, then I allow myself to go in and move quickly. But pause. Don't just keep going and going, because what I have found at least is that if you just keep going and going without thinking, that's when you oftentimes continue or start tracing over sections of lines that actually wouldn't be visible at the end. Let me keep going here, taking a pause. And even if I pause, sometimes I make mistakes. But at least if I pause and I think and I observe and I understand, my mistakes will be smaller than the mistakes that I would create if I don't think and I don't pause. Okay, so all of those are the leaves that I can see fully. And now I'm going to go over the leaves that are a little bit hidden by other elements. Okay, I see another one here. I think I see a third berry. Okay, what else do I need? I have another leaf over here. And another one here. And I think those are my leaves. Do I have any other berries? 3, 2, 1, 1, 1. I'm going to add another berry there. Okay, I think those are all my leaves. I'm going to start with the stems. And then if for some reason I forgot to trace over a leaf, I'll go ahead and trace over that. All right, cool. So one stem, and then I'm going to come down. One comes down. Here's the Y. Third stem comes down. Okay. Am I missing any stems? Let's see. There's a line there. 2. Think I'm not missing anything. I think that's it. Okay, so once I'm done with my line work in my outer contours, let me bring this closer because I'm going to be adding a little bit more detail with my pen. Okay, so once that's done, I'm going to be adding a little bit of detail. So texture marks. What do I mean? For example, my middle vein in some of these leaves could be added in with my pen. So this is what I mean with work from general towards specific. I wouldn't be thinking of adding these little veins and little details into the leaves if I don't have the general created first. If I'm not happy with the general, I'm not going to be moving on to the specifics. So a little sense of that middle vein for the leaves. And then in the bow, I can also add a little bit of line work as well. And that's it. I'm going to give you guys a couple of extra minutes. Let me know if you're struggling with anything, and I'd be happy to explain it again. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and grab my water. Okay, I'll be right back. I just realized that I didn't tell you about my paintbrushes. I'm just going to be using 2 brushes for this one, or maybe I could bring in an even smaller one for the berries. Yeah. Okay. 3 brushes for this one. You might only use 2. Depends. But you definitely want maybe a 6 round is going to be a good size, which is considered a medium-sized brush. And then a size 4, something in between the smallest and the largest that you're going to be using, could also be helpful. I'm going to be using a 0 just for the berries. Why? Because the berries are super small and the berries are also like an off-white color. So I want to make sure to leave certain sections of those berries as a simple, like having that paper shining through, unpainted, if you will. Okay. So that those berries can end up looking white. If I go in and I don't protect part of the paper and the berries are going to end up looking like they're a specific color, not white. Okay, so make sure that you choose a small brush for your berries, which is going to allow you greater control in those very small shapes so that you can leave a little section unpainted. Okay. I'm gonna leave the camera as is for just a minute longer, and then I'm gonna bring it up so that you can see what I'm doing when I'm mixing colors and stuff on my watercolor palette. Let me know how you're doing. My hands are cold. Oof. I need to get a heater in here. Let me check on YouTube, see how everyone is doing. The YouTubes. Um, if you have any questions, let me know. So all we're missing is the last part of the process, which is the the watercolor washes. And this part of the process I want you to do loosely. The washes are meant to complement the line work that we already did with our drawing pen. When it comes to line and wash, it's mixed media, right? It's watercolor and it's ink pen. And you're combining these mediums in such a way that you create something that looks well balanced. So when I am combining mediums, I am always thinking of how I'm going to be balancing things out so that I don't over describe with either medium. Because if you do too much with both, at the end, you're going to end up with something that could be flat looking, could be overworked, or just overly described. So what I like doing is asking myself, how much am I going to be doing with pen? How much am I going to be doing, in this case, with watercolor? Am I going to be doing approximately a 50-50 amount of work with each? Am I going to be doing 80-20, 70-30? It's not that precise, but just thinking of it in this way gives you a little bit of a guide so that you know that, if you want one of the two mediums or three mediums or however many mediums it is that you're going to be bringing in, if you want that medium to shine or to be the most prominent dominating medium, then you have to do less with the others, right? If you do too much with one of them and then too much with the other one, then you're not, if everything is equally important, then nothing is important. Nothing is that important, you know? Let me say that again. If everything is equally important, then nothing is very important. So you can't just go in without a plan and just keep going and going and going with all your mediums, because at the end, things are going to be just too much, too overwhelming for the viewer, too unbalanced. There's not going to be balance there. So with this piece, usually with line and wash, you're going to see different, you're going to definitely, like, I would recommend, if you really like line and wash, do some investigation, create a folder on your desktop or device, and collect line and wash pieces from different artists of whatever kind of subject matter it is that you enjoy, whether it's landscapes, still life, botanicals, whatever it is. Collect different line and wash pieces that you like from different artists, and then analyze them closely, because you're going to notice that some artists do more with pen and ink than others, and other artists do more with watercolor than others, and others do kind of a 50-50. Keep things relatively simple with watercolor and relatively simple with their line work. Sometimes, for example, in this one, I didn't do any alternative shading at all. Alternative shading, which I also have a video on in my channel, where I take you through how to do hatching and cross hatching and contour lines and all that through shading spheres. When you're doing alternative shading, it's a method of shading. So you're adding greater detail, you're adding more work with your lines before going in with watercolor. So you don't have to do so much with watercolor at all, because the shading and the value development and a little bit of a sense of 3D-ness has already been done with the ink. So you don't have to worry about doing that with watercolor. If you don't do any alternative shading or any detailing with your line work and you just go over the outer contours, then maybe it's worthwhile doing a little bit of shading with watercolor, right? To develop a little sense of roundness or 3D-ness. So think of it in that sense. Like, how much do you want to do with pen and ink? How much do you want to do with watercolor? Now, for this specific illustration, we're keeping it simple because this is mainly as part of a greeting card design. So we're going to be adding a little message at the bottom, and we're not really going for super high levels of realism. So we don't have to think of how we're going to be shading and all this, but it's still worthwhile to think of it in that way. What I'm going to be doing with watercolor right now is something, it's simple, it's loose, it's expressive, and I'm not going to be doing much layering at all. Maybe I'm going to be doing 2 layers in some elements, but it's going to be done quickly and loosely, okay? Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Let me see if I have any questions. Awesome. Let's see. Awesome. Yay, share. Awesome. I was glad to see you, and good luck. And yeah, this recording will be up indefinitely, so you can definitely watch it on your own time whenever you can. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend and take good care, and hope to see you around. Cool. Let's see. We're okay. Yay, Dawn. Awesome. Halfway done. I explained the why. Shelly, I'm glad that is helpful. I'm so glad to hear that. Carol, hi. Stuck it in my mind is starting now. Oh no, Carol. Well, this recording is going to be up indefinitely, so you can definitely see it. You can check it out whenever you can from the beginning. Camilla, all done. Awesome. Cool. Let's do this. So I'm going to use my soft graphite eraser and I'm just going to go over my graphite work to erase it out before getting started with the watercolor. Why? Because once I cover my graphite with watercolor, I'm not going to be able to erase it. So if you do want to erase it, I would recommend doing it now. I've never had any issues with my pens, which I've mentioned which ones I use many times already, so I won't say that again. But I've never had any issues with smudging when I'm erasing my graphite work. But I would recommend at least waiting for 5 minutes or, approximately before erasing over it, just so that you can avoid any undesired smudging. There we go. Okay. Graphite has been erased out. And let me start with my, let me bring off my camera so that you can see more of my palette and my kind of actions as I am moving through this. With actions, I mean when I am taking water from my container and using my towel, which these towels are, for me, the best kind of absorbent towel when I am painting, because they are very thin. They don't have texture to them. So if I ever want to go in and do any lifting or blotting, I can do it in a more controlled way. I can wrap my towel around my finger and just go in and just lift up paint off areas, as opposed to having a thick textured towel. That is a lot harder to do. You're going to leave splotchiness and texture when you're doing lifting. So these are called Blue Scott shop absorbent towels. They're actually meant for cars, so you can buy them in like Pep Boys and AutoZone and stuff like that. I think you can also buy them in like Home Depot and stuff like that, but I think in the beginning they were actually intended for use with cars, to dry cars and stuff like that. But it's like what I like using. Okay, so let's do this. My container with water is right here. And let's start with the greens. So this is Undersea Green from Daniel Smith. I'm just going to make a little puddle here. And as I said before, I'm going to be bringing in some lemon yellow to create a second version of my green that is lighter, because I don't want all of my leaves to just be a flat single green. I want a variety in value and hue in my greens. Okay, so whatever green it is that you are using, and by the way, I am using my size 6 round brush to create my color mixtures. Don't try to do your color mixtures with your smaller brushes, because that's going to be very frustrating, okay? Make sure that you're creating your color mixtures with a medium-sized brush that is able to take a good amount of paint as you're swiveling your paintbrush and your paint, and bring it out onto your mixing area. Because if the smaller the brush, the less absorbent it is. The less paint, the less water it's able to hold in its bristles. So don't make things frustrating for yourself by using a very small brush to do your mixing. Okay, cool. So I have my 2 greens, the darker green and the lighter green. If you want to create a medium one in between, that's also something that I would recommend doing. Essentially, what is important is that some of these leaves look lighter than others. You don't want all of your leaves to be the same green, okay? And sometimes I'm going to be dropping in the darker green while that initial green is still wet. So let me explain. Okay. So I now have 3 greens, the darkest, the medium, and the lightest, right? All it is the lightest has more yellow in it, the medium has less yellow in it, and the darkest is just plain undersea green. Okay? Now, remove that paint from my paintbrush bristles, remove that excess water. I am taking my lightest green, and I'm going to start painting in my leaves. I have 1. And then If that is still wet and you want to drop in another color, another one of your greens, you can go in and do that while that first green is still wet so that you can have that nice soft effect. Now I can take maybe my medium green and I can start painting another one. Try not to paint in the berries, which are white. I'm gonna take some of my lemon yellow, drop it in. So somewhat of a variety of values in each leaf. Gonna make it look more believable. I'm gonna move through my leaves in that way, painting one at a time. Whatever colors it is that you're going to be using in your leaf, start with the lighter one first. That is easier. And then drop in the darker one. Instead of going in with the darker one and then the light, go in with the lighter first. Go one at a time. I'm getting soft effects because I'm working quickly and I'm dropping in the second green while that first green is still wet. And as I go, if my paint starts running out, I just make more. And you can see how I'm constantly blotting the tip of my brush onto my absorbent towel to stay on top of water control. Do you have any ideas on what message to add at the bottom? Let me know. One of the hardest things about working with watercolor or learning how to use watercolor, especially when you're coming from a background where you were painting with another type of medium, whether it's acrylics or oils, is that the process is the inverse or the opposite of those other mediums. And also something that was incredibly hard for me to develop was the ability to just go in and allow the paint to do its thing with minimal blending and as less layering as possible, so that I could end up with loose, fresh results. Because the thing is that when you're working with mediums that are opaque, such as acrylics or oils, blending is required, layering is required. It's not only normal, but it's necessary if you're going really for whether it's high levels of realism or in between or even abstracts. Layering and blending are required for those mediums. But when you're working with watercolor, what took my painting to another level is understanding that the less layering I do, the less moving around of paint that I do, the less fiddling I do, the better the results will be. Okay, so if you, like me, are coming from a background where you learned how to use acrylics and oils very well, have in mind that this medium is like the opposite. It's the opposite process because you're usually working from lights to darks and you are making the paper part of your piece. You're actually planning on sections where the paper is going to be incorporated as part of the piece, where the paper is either left unpainted or has a very light translucent layer of color where the paper is shining through. Um, or yeah, you're incorporating the paper even as part of lighter value areas because you're using the paint in a very watered down way in lighter value areas, right? Because when you're painting with watercolor, white paint is not even required because the paper stands in place for your white. And you're learning to incorporate and use that white paper to help you communicate those highlights and lighter value areas. And you're playing with the consistency of your paint to allow you to develop the different values that you need, right? If you are using thicker paint, you're going to cover up more paper and that is going to create a darker value. If you're using thinner, more watered down paint, that is going to create a lighter value, right? Because you're allowing more of that paper to shine through. By the way, I am kind of jumping around because if I paint a leaf that is right next to a leaf that I just painted, I can start getting some bleeding happening or backruns because that paint that is still drying right next to that new fresh paint that I'm laying down, it's still it's when paint is still wet and you paint right beside that section, the paint that is still wet is going to bleed or seep into that new section of wetness that you create. Now, bleeding can look beautiful, don't get me wrong, okay? But the thing is that when you're painting with watercolor, you have to think of whether you want that bleeding to happen or you don't want that bleeding to happen. Right now, I don't. Why is it important to think of it? Because with watercolor, we can't really take back our mistakes. We can't easily fix or cover up mistakes like we can with acrylics and oils. So it's good to at least give some thought or foresee what could happen if you start doing something so that you can avoid effects that maybe you're not looking for. In other cases, I actually make bleeding part of the process. I want bleeding to happen. But with this type of illustration right now, I don't. Okay, so I'm looking to see which leaf I can paint. This one over here I think will be fine because this one is almost dry. See how all of my leaves have at least a slight range of green values? It's not a flat green. Mm, okay. Let me know if you have any questions. Need to paint this one here, which is being covered up by the other ones. And when you have a smaller shape, it's helpful to switch to a smaller brush. Right now, I've just continued using my size 6, which does come to a nice fine tip. But if at any point you feel more confident using a smaller brush, just switch. switch to a smaller brush. Okay, I think those are all the leaves painted in. So now I'm going to go ahead and paint the bow. Okay. So for the bow, I'm going to be using my Cadmium Red Light, which is a warmer red. Yeah, I think I already mentioned this, but when I'm painting Christmas themed illustrations, I like using warmer reds or at least middle of the range reds. So think of reds that look a little bit more orange or at least not purplish. You don't want to use something like alizarin crimson because that is too cool. That is leaning a little bit too much toward the purple side of the spectrum. That is a cool red. I do have a video where I explain how to tell between warm and cool colors. You can find it over at my channel. That is really going to help clear up things for you in terms of what is warm or cool. It even provides a super helpful color wheel exercise. I know that color temperature can be very confusing for people, so that is why I wanted to create that one video for you. Hope you're able to check it out. Okay, so I'm going to go in with my cadmium red light, and just as a second, slightly darker red, I'm going to create a second puddle over here, which includes a tiny bit of Payne's gray. This is Payne's gray. But again, you could decide to darken your red with an ultramarine blue or even an indigo to get a slightly darker version of it. That's also something that I sometimes do. Okay. Now I think I'm going to switch on over to my size 4 round brush for the bow. It depends how thick or wide your ribbon sections are. You might be able to paint the bow with something larger. Okay, so first I'm going in with my lighter color of the two that I'm thinking of using for this specific section. And I never go in with a super thick consistency. I try to water down my paint, use something in this kind of illustration because really it's a simple one. I could go in with a coffee consistency since the beginning, but when I am going for more realistic results and I'm going to be working in layers, I usually go in initially with a tea consistency of whatever color it is that I'm going to be using. And all I do is bring a little bit of water from my container and place some drops of water here along the edges of my little puddle, water that paint down, and use it in that way in the beginning. And then as you build, you get thicker and thicker. You start using more coffee, milk, or even cream consistencies after. Okay. But first, size 4 round brush, tea consistency, see how pale it looks? And you can even leave little highlight sections in the ribbon if you want to make it look shiny. You can see that little section that I left unpainted. Right? So paint in that bow, and then you can use your same red in a slightly thicker consistency, drop it in to start developing a little bit of a range of values just with one single color. It's a little bit too much, too intense. I'm going to fix this little edge. Okay, and then I'm going to add in a little bit more here. There you go. So I've started developing a nice range of red values just with one single color. And I even left a little teeny tiny highlight there, unpainted. Let me bring it closer to the camera so you can see what I mean. See that little highlight that I left unpainted right there? So that's just using one single color. That is one of the beauties of watercolor, is that you can create a wide range of values with just one single color. But usually, when you're going for higher levels of realism, you do want to learn color mixing. What should you be bringing in to darken it or lighten it, etc. You're welcome, Shelly. Okay, cool, awesome. So let me go ahead and continue with this. Again, starting with a watered down version of my cadmium red light. And also, for me, in my opinion, blue is difficult because, in all honesty, I don't see much of a difference in temperature between ultramarine blue and cobalt blue, which is supposed to be middle of the range blue. So that is also something that you should know, Shelly. But just it's important that you're able to tell the difference between cobalt and ultramarine and something that does have green in it, like phthalo blue. Okay, great. So there's that. And now I'm going to go ahead and paint the other sections of the bow, watering down my cadmium red light a little bit. I'm going to paint the little bottom sections before the middle one. And this one, ooh, I didn't do the bottom section. I need to go back to my pen and ink very quick. See how I forgot to add in this bottom section of the ribbon? I'm going to allow it to dry before painting that in. I'm going to paint the other sections first. Okay. So watered down cadmium red and then thicker cadmium red. And then if you want to darken even further, you do the darker version of your red. I'm still trying to get at least a slight range of values in all the sections of the bow that I'm painting. Okay, so I need to allow that little teeny tiny section to dry that I just sketched in with my drawing pen before painting it. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the berries. So I'm going to bring out a little bit of my yellow ochre right here on my palette. And with the berries, I do want to go in with my smallest brush. I'm going to be using my size 0 round brush. Very watered down color, especially initially. And what I'm going to be doing with the berries is I'm going to be leaving a little section in the middle of each circle unpainted. Okay, so size 0 round brush. Let me bring down my camera, sorry, so that you can see what I'm doing. Water down color, and I'm going to go around the berry with my yellow ochre, leaving the middle unpainted, removing that paint from my paintbrush bristles, removing that excess water on my absorbent towel, and smudging or blurring the line. See, I'll do it again. Go around the shape, remove that paint from your paintbrush bristles, remove that excess water, and soften the edge. That's what I'm going to do in all of these. Paint around the berry, remove that paint from your paintbrush bristles, remove the excess water, and soften the edge. As watercolor dries, it's going to look lighter, so that's a thing as well. If after things have dried, you want to go in and darken certain sections, you can do that, but just make sure to allow each layer to dry completely. And that's it. Okay, I'm gonna go in and paint that missing section of my ribbon. Dropping in a little bit more cadmium red. Okay. And that is the first layer painted all throughout. Now, if you want to work in layers and maybe develop a little bit more realism, you can, but it's not necessary because this is a simple illustration. But I'm just going to explain what I would do if I were working in layers, okay? Let's see, I have another question. What is the name of the watercolor paper again? I looked for it, but must have spelled it wrong. Okay, so I have to actually see it. I can't. Bao Hong. It's B O, sorry, BAOHONG. BAOHONG. Bao Hong. BAOHONG. Okay, so here's what I would do if I were to work in 2 layers. There are artists out there that work in 1 layer. There are artists that work in 2. There are artists that work in many layers. There is no right or wrong way to do things in watercolor, but it is important that you allow layers to dry in between before working over them if you're looking for fresher results, if you want to stay away from overworking things. But if you wanted to go in and develop a little bit more detail, this would be the point where you start darkening areas even more. So for example, if I am using Payne's gray and adding Payne's gray into my red to darken it, this is where I darken it even more by adding more Payne's gray into it and just darkening shadow areas and leaving all of the other areas alone because I don't want to darken them any further. So you just add little shadow shapes. Okay, do more overlapping with your darker color in areas where you can benefit from adding more shadow shapes and leave the previous layer completely uncovered by the second layer in areas where you don't need to darken anymore. All right. And that is going to add more 3D-ness and depth to your painting if you want to make things look more realistic. Simply because you're developing a wider range of values. Okay. In the leaves, for example, the second layer would be a point where you are adding more of your green into your mixture, or you're going in with your plain green sometimes in a thicker state to develop more of a shadow shape, especially where you have overlapping leaves, right? Where would it make sense for shadows to be? Down here. Right? Wherever you want to darken, you can go ahead and darken with a second layer. Just be careful. Be careful not to do too much because, again, you don't want to get rid of that freshness. And we already did our best to develop a nice range of values, even with one single layer. So if you managed to do that, your painting should already be showing, some level of realism. But I just wanted to show you what I would do if I were to take this further. Okay, so hopefully you can see how by going in with a second layer in certain little sections here and there, you can add depth to your painting in a very simple way. Just ask yourself, where would it make sense for shadows to be? If you want to go in with another layer in your berries, add a little bit more of your yellow ochre or raw sienna to thicken up your paint. And just go over smaller sections of your berries, just little edges here and there, maybe not even all of them. Essentially, the darker you get with your colors, the smaller the shapes that you're creating. You don't want your darker colors to completely cover up your lighter colors because lighter colors are necessary to create that range of values. Okay, there. Awesome. So I'm all done with the line and wash piece. I'm going to just quickly add in a little message down here with handwritten lettering and we'll be all done. So I'm going to be adding happy holidays, okay, down here. And for this, I'm going to be using my pencil again. If you have a ruler will be helpful. And my micron pen again. Let me just move these wet things out of the way. Maybe my container can be set aside as well. And let me know if you have any questions because we're almost done. And I want to make sure to answer all of your questions before leaving today. Okay. Back to my B pencil. If you have a ruler or any kind of straight edge around you, maybe I'm going to do happy holidays just in one single line, but you could also do it in 2 lines. Just going to give you some tips to add handwritten lettering. Now, I'm by no means a pro at handwritten lettering, but a few tips can really help you achieve better results, keeping things aligned and relatively centered and stuff. Okay, so give me one sec. So if I do happy holidays in one same line, this is a space, right, that I need to leave. But I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because I need to count this, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I need a total of 14 spaces or 14 letters if you count that single space, right? And I need these letters to fit here with a little bit of empty space to the left and the right. So I'm going to draw 2 short verticals here because I want at least this amount of space on the left and right. Okay. And I want my letters to fit here inside of this rectangle. So if I have this rectangle, I already know that my letters are going to be aligned and centered and in the location where I want them to be. If I place a vertical right in the middle of this rectangle, okay, if this is the middle of the rectangle, what is the middle? If these are 14 letters, this is the letter that should be right in the middle, right? Or actually in between the 7 and 8. Yes, because 14 divided by 2 is 7. So I should have 7 and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm very bad at math. So bear with me. Okay, so this means that my H should be here and my O should be here. And if I make sure that the H is here and the O is here, approximately, that is going to help me keep things centered. Okay, so check this out. After I have placed my H and my O, I can do L, I, and I actually like capital letters more than lowercase or mix. So I'm going to do capital letters D, E, Z, and then I do a single space, and the Y has to be here, and then the P, P, A, H. Does that make sense? By starting with the letters or a single letter, depends on the words that you're adding in, but by starting with the letter or the letters that are right in the middle and placing those first, then you can do the letters that are on the right of that and on the left of that. And because you started with the ones in the center, things are going to be more aligned. Okay? Let me just fix this a little bit and I'll go over these with my pen and ink. And I'm just going to do a very basic capital letter. I'm not even going to trace super perfectly over my pencil work. So let me explain what I like doing for this. Okay, let's see. I'm going to build a little house around my letters that I already created with pencil. You can do it a little bit more carefully than I just did it, but I just want to speed things up because this class has already been long enough, so I don't want to take up too much time. So I'm doing this relatively quickly. I'm making my letters a little bit wider than what I did before with my pencil. But I would recommend taking your time with the pencil before moving on to the pen and ink. Holidays. The A is always difficult for me. But you can see how this is a very basic capital letter, bubble letter. Days. And S. S is hard. That's holidays. And then the happy is missing. So I need to make sure that I have a space here. So I'm going to start with the Y just because I changed the width of my letters quite a bit just now that I went in with the pen and ink. And I don't want to start here and not have enough space there. Accidentally bring everything together. So I started with the Y. But again, if you take your time with the pencil before getting started with the pen, you can avoid this kind of situation and you can actually start in the beginning, right? If your pencil is well done, you can start with the H and move forward. But because my pencil, I didn't take my time with the pencil, I rushed through it. I'm having to do a lot of like mind work with my pen and ink when I shouldn't really have to if I had done this a little bit more carefully. H is missing. Okay, so H. So what I like doing sometimes, and this helps if you make a mistake, is filling the letters in with pen. And sometimes I just fill some letters in and not others. I think it creates a little bit of personality. But you can fill in all of them, it depends, or leave them unfilled if you like that. Whatever kind of lettering it is that you enjoy. I mean, you could even do cursive if you have beautiful cursive handwriting. Wildflower, it's nice to see you here. Hope you're having a nice holiday season. If you have any last questions, let me know because we're almost done here. I hope that this first session was helpful and that you enjoyed it and that you're looking forward to the upcoming session, sorry, on the next 2 Saturdays. My Patreon community is going to be choosing the paintings that we're going to be working on. I am sending out polls on Mondays, and they are choosing from the ideas that I share in those polls. And then I'm preparing the class based on what they chose. I'm going to allow that to dry, and then I can go in with my eraser and erase out my my pencil work. All right. Yeah. How did it go, people? How are you doing? This has been a very informative and most engaging live. I'm so glad I could make it and learn so much. Shelly, I was so happy to see you here, and I am so happy to hear that this was helpful. Hope that you're able to join us, maybe in another one of the sessions that I'll be sharing next Saturday, and the Saturday after that. I have more to share with you, and we can continue practicing our line and wash together. Any last questions, you guys? Still sniffly. My hands are still very cold too. I think this should be good enough to erase. Yeah, I'm fine. I don't know what it is about these erasers, but I love how they smell. I'm weird. If you have ever smelled this kind of eraser, I like how they smell. It's one of my favorite smells. Anyway, I seem to have no more questions. Shelly, Wildflower, Junia, Camilla, Carol, Cher, Dawn, everyone who made it. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you're having a great holiday season. Enjoy this season, enjoy those special moments with loved ones. Hope you're able to continue making some time for your art practice during this usually crazy time of the year. And yeah, this was awesome. I'm looking forward to our next line and wash session, live line and wash session next Friday, which is the 14th at exactly the same time. Hope you join us. And this recording will be up over at my channel. Probably I'm gonna edit out the first like 15 minutes or so. I don't know how long it took me before starting, but I will edit that out and make that needles hi and make that available indefinitely over at my channel so that everyone can get value from this class on their own times. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. Hope this was helpful. Hope it was fun. And if you have any questions or you would like to connect with me, whether it's through YouTube, whether it's through Instagram, Patreon members that are here, you can reach out via Patreon. You have access to my email as well. Feel free to reach out. That is what I'm here for. I always love connecting with artists and creatives from all over the world. I'm always so honored to get messages and receive emails from people. So thank you guys, and feel free to reach out at any time. I'm here to help. Thank you so much. Have an amazing rest of your weekend, a great holiday season, and hope to see you soon. Bye, everyone. Bye.